And we are live. Now, let me ask you a question. Is it really go hard or go home if you go home hard?
No, and
Anyway,
yes.
welcome to the Civil Offense stream, guys. We're doing the Sunday stream today. We have, we have two wonderful guests here, beautiful people. I'm going to introduce them real quick for you. First of all, we have Ancat. What's up, Ancat?
What's up?
That's it? That's all you got for today? All right, guys.
I mean, yeah, I didn't. I don't really have much prepared, but
okay.
You know,
and then we have Ignis. But make
Hello,
sure you
how's
don't
it
put.
going?
But make sure you don't put that N in the front, because then you'd have niggas.
That's in the first 30 seconds, man.
And we don't take kindly to niggas around here.
bro, you're getting so close to saying it. Say it on stream. Say it on stream. Say it on stream.
What's up, Zach? What are you doing, Joe Biden?
Zach, you're just a fucking troll, man.
Look, anyway, so some announcements today. Just, well, this is not usual for the Sunday stream, I guess, but, go to the Civil Offense stream itself, the podcast that I do. It's on YouTube, Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere where you find them, really, I think. And then go to ahmedmali.com. Make sure to sign up for my email list where you have the latest updates. And make sure to check out my Discord server where you find the latest updates, because I do tell people when we are live. I just told everybody that we are live. So yeah, what is up with you guys? I don't know. I kind of asked you that, but you just guys said what's up. Ignis, do you have anything else after that?
Nothing too much, no. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were talking earlier before the stream started. I was repairing my shoes that I got from Goodwill because the soles are coming off. That's literally like what I've been doing for the past, and then no, I can't afford them.
Bruh.
Poor.
I'm just only libertarians can't be poor. If you're poor, you're not a real libertarian.
Is this true?
Kind of true.
Okay, so Ignis, you went to Revolution as well. I was talking about it on my last stream, and I gave some of my stories there. But yeah, how was that?
It was good. Met a lot of the same people there. The speaker's good. Dave Smith didn't make it out there. I wanted to see him again, the Mises Caucus people, but what if there was a falling out? Some information that I didn't know, but no.
Second year in a row not seeing Michael Malice after the first year he said he would be there and canceled.
I don't think there was like any chance of him coming to that shit.
Yeah. I wanted to see
I would love to see Michael Malice.
Yeah. Exactly. And Ancat, I know you told me about this with Michael Malice. You were saying like he's like the teddy bear of the anarchist movement.
It's true though. Like he's just so nice to everyone, even what's his name? That that black guy with the speech impediment. I forget his name.
You're talking about Jesse Lee Peterson. You're not talking.
Yeah. Jesse Lee Peterson. I was blanking on his name for some reason. Yeah, he like had Jesse Lee Peterson on, and he was just really nice. But Jesse Lee Peterson's kind of an insane person. So,
apparently, actual Justice Warrior was there at Rev, and apparently Michael Malice blocked him at some point.
Yeah, he did talk about
really.
That. Yeah, he violated one of his rules or something on Twitter. And I was telling him maybe it's because you replied to a poll saying neither option or something like that, some other option than what was on the poll, because Malice does not like it when you talk about other options other than what he gives you as the 2 or 3 options or however many it is. Because it's annoying. It's not answering the actual question. But yeah, so we were going to stream at Rev. We didn't end up doing that because first of all, the Wi-Fi wasn't so great over there, but also, the party never stops. So obviously it's not like we could have just, picked up and done that at any point. There wasn't really a great time, but we could have figured it out had the Wi-Fi been better. But yeah, story I forgot last time I actually wanted to mention, because I was talking to Ancat after the stream, and then I was telling him the story, and he's like, dude, you should have mentioned that. So there was this lady from, what was she, Ayn Rand Institute? It was one of those, right? And she was talking about a lot of different current events. She's like, oh, Megan Rapinoe at the soccer game, and like, this and that and that. And like, oh, men are turning more conservative. If you look at the high school students, men are turning more conservative and women are more liberal now. And then she's like, well, look, this doesn't mean we have to repeal the 19th Amendment. And then there's silence for a second, and I just start clapping, and then the whole room is clapping over that. And it reminded me of this other thing that happened last year, where we had it, like, there was this what was it? There was this talk, right? This panel between Clint Russell, Mark Claire, Reed Coverdale. I don't know if anybody else was at that one. We were there with me, Ignis, but pretty much Yeah, they were just talking about like national divorce and some other things. I forgot exactly what it was, but they were talking about politicians. And basically, somebody said like, "Oh yeah, we should treat politicians like dogs." And then Clint's like, "Put them down." And then again, this was a moment where it was silent, and I just start clapping, and then the whole room is clapping there again. So I have 2 moments from like one from each rev, and I hope at the next one, like if I am there, I get another one of these moments.
Can't stop being based even if you tried, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. You know, it never actually ends. You know, before the stream, I was going to mention this probably later, but you know, we might as well. Like we were talking about diet before the stream. You know, we're not going to get to Ancap versus Agorist yet because we have to talk about this, obviously.
To talk about
Of
the
course, diet
games,
first.
bro.
Yeah, exactly. You were telling me about some guy, Ignis, that doesn't like or he doesn't like fat.
Yeah. So this is to Blackwing if you're watching, but we had a conversation over the course of like a while, and he had some information. He was pretty well read on the old paradigm studies regarding the I forget what it's called specifically, but the theory of like how diabetes forms, and it's through insulin resistance forms because of fat deposits in your muscles. And something that I think that we basically left off at is okay, yes, but that comes from calorie excess either way. And in ketosis, consuming fat, dietary fat does not equal body fat. And the issue being with the high carb diets is that that's just turned into fat in your liver, and that's then stored in your muscles. So even that mechanism for how that's formed isn't necessarily like exclusive to fat. But then, uh, so regarding that, I also sent him like a study that was done on, I think, like diabetic patients where they were put on a keto diet and their triglyceride count came way down. And then the only time he addressed that really was like, okay, but those are diabetic patients. And I'm like, you could generalize that to everybody. And I think that's a pretty safe generalization, like an inductive argument. And then I don't think he addressed that again, but left off of that. But he hates all the keto stuff.
Yeah, it's just like the moment of like, oh yeah, fat just equals fat in the body. Like consuming fat just equals you are fatter, and that's it. Like that's it to it. Somebody I really like as far as diet goes is okay. Well, we're about to see this first. William Evans hates the Antichrist. Okay, well there you go. One person I really like when it comes to diet is Paul Saladino, who is animal based. He's really good. Yes, animal based as opposed to plant cringe. Actually, he's pretty good on this stuff. Yeah, and you know his diet really just consists of meat, mostly like ruminant animals that you know obviously are more grass fed, you know, as opposed to the corn or soy, especially if they're monogastric. He's not a fan of that, but you know, mostly with cows, it's actually not as bad of a problem generally. But then there's like eggs, cheese, like raw dairy, like a lot of raw dairy as opposed to just like dairy in general. And I cannot get my hands on much raw dairy. All I can get is like some like Gruyere cheese or whatever. It's you know, it's raw. That's the only thing I can get raw. You know, I'm trying to get it raw. You know, you feel me, dog?
He has a lot of fruit as well.
Yeah,
We know,
and he actually talks. I was going to mention that because like Ignis over here, he talks about carbs as like an issue itself. But when it comes down to it, like you know, a lot of the problems actually coming from like the refined sugars and the flour and all that, as opposed to the actual like fruit and honey, because he eats that. He says he gets about like and he eats maple syrup as well. He gets about like 300 grams a day around there, like net carbs. Yeah. Pretty much of just carbs. Like he doesn't just eat that, of course. That is just part of his diet. But he is very much in shape. He is actually, you know, doing very well on that diet. And pretty much I've seen some of like what he eats in the middle of the day because he'll eat like a big breakfast, big dinner. He's shown like in the middle of the day, he'll just eat like basically like fruit, milk, like, you know, not anything too heavy, if anything. We have Gains and Dames back, bro. What's up? You're here to stay, right? Red meat and dairy, bro. Got on that Mongolian diet, huh? Let's see. What do you guys think of national libertarianism? Ancat, do you want to answer that? Ancat first, please.
I mean, I'm really hoping that all of us can agree that we hate it.
I mean, just like,
is this cringe? I don't know.
I mean, I want to say like, what do you mean? But I want to draw it back to like a Zulu video that changed my mind on borders. I'll say I was wrong in the past when it came to like the borders discussion, but the idea of like a nation state or anything like that, or even just a nation itself, say like without a state or something like that, which already get into issues there. but the idea of just like the nation as a whole, either controlled by the people or controlled by the government or anything like that, that is a group property norm. That is like a society owns the nation, or sort of thing, and that already gets into issues of contradictions in terms of property norms, and that gets into like kind of socialist nonsense where it's like, it's not that you own your house, it's not that you own your private property, because above your ownership is the state, and they have the right to exercise eminent domain or anything like that to solve property disputes. And it just gets into a whole bunch of just like contradictory nonsense where it's just like the sort of like realist view of it is like, if you accept that the state has control over the borders of a nation, then you're accepting that nobody owns private property within the nation, that it's all owned by the state.
Yeah, I mean, once you start arguing, in favor of this, this unilateral standard of property where, oh, well, the state should treat it as like this intermediary caretaker, like you start running into a lot of problems really, really quickly, to where, oh, well, okay, well, in this one exception, we can have the state act as an intermediary caretaker. I've likened the like the more Hoppian take on borders, or the more like ethno-nationalist take on borders that a lot of people try to merge with libertarianism. I kind of treat it to similarly to how like Noam Chomsky treats the welfare state, where he sort of claims to be an anarchist, but like says
What,
that,
a narco
oh, well,
social democrat.
right, exactly. Well, but his argument is that, oh, well, in the meantime, now that the state has stripped you of your X, Y, and Z, they should also, in the meantime, before the state goes away, it should do X, Y, and Z. Whereas in reality, if you want the state to go away, you should be, rejecting it in all instances, not just a few.
Okay, we got like, let's see, so a comment here. No, I'm a Nat Libertarian. I'm not Libertarian.
No.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, no. Let's see.
Join
We
the
got
server. Join the server.
Carson
We can have more.
Allworth. We got Carson Allworth. If you had to steal a penny to save the world, would you? Yes.
Yeah, probably.
I'd say it would be a contradiction in property norms to do so. If I want to like stay consistent, and if I want to stay true to non-aggression, then I wouldn't. But as a person, I'm not perfect in staying consistent with that sort of thing. It is an outcome that I wouldn't prefer if the world were destroyed.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I think that a lot more libertarians should cite. There's a difference between libertarian ethics and principles and performed actions. So a lot of people would say like, oh, well, would you maybe trespass on someone's property to save someone, or would you pull the lever on the trolley? What you might do in like the heat of the moment, when you're in a really tough situation and you're not really thinking, and you're maybe not a perfect person, or what you might think even in that moment might be more ethical, it doesn't change the fact that libertarian ethics are true. Does that make sense? I think just people are flawed, I think a lot of us, even as libertarians, we've done maybe not like big things, but I'm sure in our past we've done unethical things that were like legitimately unethical. But I think it's more important to, I guess, taking it back to Aristotle, like ethics isn't an action. Ethics is a like state of being, So it's who you are and who you develop yourself as a person, I don't think I don't think like you could be like cast aside from being a libertarian if you like stole a penny 2 years ago. You stole a penny that was technically someone else's 2 years ago. But if you're consistently a good person, then I think that you could reasonably call yourself a libertarian. Whereas like there would be a contradiction in being like a libertarian cop, for instance, because who you are as a person entails performing all these aggressive things toward people, so.
Yeah, and I asked you this last time we saw each other, Ignis. I was talking about like, would you save somebody that is your friend from like jumping off a bridge? Like if he was convinced like I need to jump off this bridge and die right now, like would you stop him? And then your position is that like, oh, I ought not do it, but maybe I would do it anyway. Like, so, well, how does that exactly make sense if like you ought not do it? Shouldn't you be following that?
I mean, just like you could go It depends on how like safe you want to be in aggression, where it's just like you don't have perfect information, so it could be the case that say it's just like it's a cry for help. They aren't actually doing it, and they completely consent to you tackling them away from the ledge. That could be the case, and if that is the case, then you could do that, and it could be the case that isn't aggression. It could be the case that no, they're pretty set on this sort of thing that they want to do this, and then it's just like, yeah, that would be aggression for you to
But would you do it?
tackle them to the side or something. It's like they have a psychotic break, they can't advocate their will. That gets into like a more messy situation with like the theorists can agree, disagree, and debate that back and forth. I'm kind of done with like the extremes of the discussion on that sort of thing.
Should we be basing it on a psychotic break though? Like on
No.
whether or not that's happening?
No, generally no. I think that sort of theory isn't supported yet, where it's just like you can have a situation where you don't advocate your will so that people can do certain things. It's not necessarily supported yet.
Yeah, and I think that like a lot of statists or a lot of libertarians fall into the bait where statists try to like so say you're talking to a statist or whatever, and you're trying to explain, okay, here's what the state is, here's how it functions, here's how it here are all the ways that it systematically oppresses people through its engineering of political norms. And then they try to steer the conversation away. Oh, would you steal a penny to say, would you do X, Y, and Z? And I think a lot of libertarians like mistakenly get kind of baited into that, where it's like, the core of our argument doesn't really, rely on those minute examples. We can point, like, I think the more important thing to talk about is specifically what the state is. We know that in all cases, the state can only thrive by not like some fringe example of like stealing a penny. No, they're taking all of your income at literal gunpoint. Like if you were to point to one example of theft that were like the textbook case, I think the state would probably be the perfect example. And I think it's just such a mistake for a lot of libertarians to, I guess, get baited into what ifs, and that detracts from them actually being able to make the case on why we oppose the state in the first place.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying like that we shouldn't not answer those questions or those don't have importance in ethics. I'm just saying that I think in conversations that should be secondary, and I think it's we shouldn't get baited into these games that a lot of people like to play to distract from the issue. What was that?
You don't like getting baited? No, hold on. I need to cook, boys. We're getting comments. I need to cook real quick. Hold on. Let's see. So gotcha. We got Carson saying, "Wait, 2 out of 3 of you are penny thieves." Bro. Yes, I'm a penny thief.
Bro, because, not real libertarians.
Exactly. Really. Let's see. We got William Evans saying, "Can you get Jake on the podcast?" Who exactly are you guys familiar with?
Get Jake. I don't know who Jake is.
Who the hell is Jake?
Okay, hold on. Let's see. I don't know. Say who Jake is, and it better not be some like bend over or something joke or something. Right?
Jake from State Farm.
Exactly.
Bro, that meme died in 2018.
So I think that's just a false justification for violating the NAP. There are no such cases, or there are no cases in which you should aggress or cause conflict with another individual, and it shows in non-principled behavior. Okay, so 2 questions. Yeah. If we're gonna go on the what ifs, right? 1, would you save a baby that's drowning on somebody else's property, right? And number 2, let's say you're in the car with your baby and it has a fever and it's about to die, and then you have some of those climate protesters in the middle of the road, but they're already using the public road first, so therefore they already have the valid claim over that point of the road. Would you move them to drive and save your baby, take your baby to the hospital? Yes or no, you stupid motherfucker. Bro. Okay, I'm kidding. I'm just giving you the hypothetical.
I would do that without my baby dying.
Yeah, I would
do that.
Yeah, bro. It's all jokes, but seriously, like that's a real hypothetical in which it's like, are you going to do that, or are you going to let your baby die? Like for real. Let's see. So,
yeah, and this kind of gets back into the point that we were literally just talking upon earlier. There's a difference between performed behavior and ethics. Like just because you might internally act inconsistently doesn't mean that libertarian ethics are true. Right. You would just be acting inconsistently, or you would just be acting according to your morals as opposed to what's actually true ethically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we all do that to some extent. A lot of us do, I think.
I would pay the price for regression for stealing a penny from someone.
Yeah, I steal pennies all the time, even if not even to fund myself, just to steal it. I steal it and just throw them out into the river.
You mug a woman just to
Bro,
steal a
would you
penny.
say the N word to start world hunger?
Bro, I'd say the N word to.
To triple world
Okay,
hunger.
wait. Okay, I thought you said would you say the N word
And you were
to
about
end
to
world
yeah.
hunger, and I was gonna reverse that, but you
Yeah,
already
but I already
did.
reversed it. It's just made me think of that. Okay,
Bro, you baited me.
Pause. Okay, so we got into the Agora. Ancapism is not against the state only, but against any initiation of conflict.
Yeah.
But when did he?
Oh, is this the
Did he say
Carson that
the
I'm
I
opposite?
agree.
Did he just? Okay, so we don't just oppose the state, we oppose conflict, bro. What? But
No, but
who are you talking to? He's an agorist. What are you saying?
I think I know who this Carson is. I've seen him before.
Let's see. So we got.
He's very principled.
Okay, if y'all are so pressed about taxes, why not just live to under 15K a year and pay practically nothing in taxes?
I mean, that might be where my tax bracket's at.
Yeah, I mean, like,
income.
you know, maybe you can just report 15K in income and, you know, and then live, pay nothing in taxes. Okay, I guess, you know, well, sure. But yeah,
if you don't like someone pointing a gun at you and saying, give me $100 or give me 10, you should just, I don't know, just give them the 10. Still makes the mugging
but I mean,
perfectly justified.
I can tell this just sounds like social contract, you know, already. It's written all over it. But you know, the thing is, like,
getting mugged and having the person ask your money or your life, you should just run away. He's not legally allowed to take the money from you.
Yeah, bro. Like, it comes down to literally everything. Like, even speeding. Like, there are so many people that think about, like, oh, what if I get a ticket for going a little bit over the speed limit? Like, you have a gun constantly pointed to your head, and this is the question you're asking. Like, oh, you know, why don't you just make less money? Like, why don't you just be poorer? You know, if you don't like having a gun pointed at your head, why don't you just be poorer? Live in poverty.
Stay poor.
Let's see. So there are still estate taxes and other taxes, though. Yeah. Unless you don't own property, and then therefore you'll be a rentoid. You know. Jake is a really smart Ancap. Yeah, I mean, I don't know his channel. Like, does he have? I think you wrote something about him here.
There are a lot of Jakes in the world.
Does he have a last name? He's just called Jake.
Does Jake have a last name? He's like Beyonce. He's the owner of the Discord server I'm in called Ask an Ancap. I don't have the invite link for that. If you join my Discord server, put it in the self promotion channel, and then we'll check it out. But my Discord server link is in the description, so you can check that out.
Join if you love copious uses of the N word.
That is true. That is really true. And
Ignis, you gotta leave.
Let's see. Tao says that at Williams, Evan, just be homeless. Yeah, bro. He's like, just be homeless. Just live in your car, bro.
Just the fucking
embrace minimalism. You know, like, is this a meme? Like, are you serious, bro?
Return to monkey.
Let's see. Both cases you have presented are inaccurate and forestalling. Public roads are a status, Public roads are a status concept, and you have presented a case of forestalling, which is also not valid. Do you not believe in homesteading? Like, do you not believe that public land can be homesteaded by people justifiably without the state intervening there? Well, I'm not saying that, you know, there should be a policy, but saying it's unethical for the state to prevent somebody from homesteading public land. Let's see. So forestalling answers both these hypotheticals as illegitimate. Okay, well, you got to reply to what I said before there. Jake is at taxation is theft on Discord. Okay, I'll write that down.
There's probably a lot of those.
But yeah, put it in the Discord server. Let's see. I'll write it down real quick. So we got let's see. We got our boy Jason here. What's up, Jason? Let's see.
Welcome in.
Theft, bro. What an original username there. Taxation is theft.
Bro, I've never heard an Ancap have that username ever.
Taxation is theft or slavery. People like to forget the last word.
Tao says, yeah, but there's nothing I can do about it. But relax. Life's too short to be so pressed. Well, I mean, you know, technically there are things you can do about it, but you know, I don't know if we can necessarily
mention those on stream.
Yeah, we can't necessarily lay out all those things, but yes, there are things to do. Yeah.
Now, coincidentally, the things that the state does allow you to talk about is voting, and protesting and stuff.
Speaking of, Vivek is doing pretty well. He's pretty sharp. I think I'm going to support him in this federal election.
Oh, whoa!
Are you actually?
No, I'm not going to support him. But he's
actually
saying some nice things. He's doing pretty well.
What do you mean by saying some nice things?
He's saying some nice things. He went on like the Breakfast Club or whatever. Lady tried to do a hit piece live on him, give him a completely objective test. But he was pretty sharp. He stood up for it. Like the general premise of it was, you never served the public, and by that she means just like took a government role, became like a statist fucking politician for the whole of his life. You never
Well, now he's
served
about
the
to become
public.
one if he wins.
Yeah, without serving yourself, and he took
That'll
like
show
sort
you
of
right, lady.
yeah,
I'll become
and
one.
yeah. He took kind of like the Randian position of not apologizing for being self-interested in serving people in that way, such as with capitalism in his like biotech company where he made like the medications for however many people, like made his money through voluntary transactions.
Okay.
To an extent,
So I
it's a
actually
regulated market.
I did write a piece on Vivek for my Substack, in which I talk
Go
about
check it
how,
out.
yeah, exactly. I talk about, he's actually gaining up on DeSantis. Like there are polls showing that like, oh, he's in second place. He looks like he is going to be a front runner, or if not already, right? But basically like the point there being was that, for whatever reason, Trump's going under these indictments. First of all, it could be just, this whole like political theater in which the state's trying to get you to think, oh, this guy's being suppressed. Like he shouldn't be, like, this MAGA champion is about to, try and destroy the deep state, and the deep state's lashing out at him. It could be something else. They could just be having a need, like Ancat has said before, to just, throw him away. But even if that's the case, then Vivek actually probably would become, the front runner for president, because he still has that sort of like ideology, like the front facing stuff that the state's looking for when it's saying like, okay, well, here's the guy that people are going to think is that populist leader. Because it seems like DeSantis actually isn't showing that. There's too much like competition between Trump and DeSantis has taken a very antagonistic approach in his campaign. Vivek, on the other hand, has been very like friendly towards Trump's campaign. He actually went to this like protest about Trump being well, he's not locked up or anything, but apparently he might be in Georgia or something because of the Fulton County stuff. I don't know.
The
but
walls are
apparently
closing in.
Yeah, the walls are closing in this time, guys. He's going to be arrested come whenever, you know what I mean? But pretty much like the point there being is that like Vivek kind of gives this like America First 2.0. Like it's literally like the sequel. Like the state has a sequel here for Trump, literally, and can just recreate what he did. And probably even if they chose Vivek instead, could literally just like take out all the flaws that people had with Trump, all the concerns people had with them with Trump, and then pretty much just say like, oh look, there's this bright new guy who's gonna fix everything for you. And you remember how you guys were complaining about how all the politicians are old? Well, check out these young guys too.
You think the state's getting behind Vivek? Or Vivek?
Well, I'm saying that's the possibility, and that would be why that's the case.
I think
it actually
that
makes sense that he's gaining so much prominence.
I think he's gaining so much prominence because he's doing the circuit around like new media.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. I think that a lot of it, I don't know if like the campaigns, I know they're definitely helped. Like, so for instance, in the algorithms of like social media, like proprietary social media, as well as, state media as well, because typically the way I see it is that elections, I think to some extent are basically predetermined, only in the sense that whichever candidate they want to have certain amounts of media coverage, that's those are the candidates that the like corporate media, state media is going to promote. So, but I do think that there are like organic aspects to it too. I think that like, bottom up campaigns as far as just wanting to become prevalent. So I think that, I guess, Vivek's use of more social media platforms, like advocating for younger generations, I guess could be helping. But typically it's the boomers who are the biggest voting bloc, because they're the ones who are the most have the most brain rot.
And they have the time to care, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay, some more comments real quick, and then we're gonna we're gonna do some more comments, and then I actually want to talk about Malay as well. If that's how you say his last name, right? Let's see. Oh, actually, this one first. Tao is just this guy has to be a troll. There's no way he's serious, and like I'm gonna believe everything he said. I'm gonna believe everything he said before that is actually just a troll, and like disregard everything I said to you, bro. Like I could tell. Let's see. Carson Allworth is saying hypothetical. Imagine I have to drive to the hospital for my child, but the route is too long, and the only way to get there in time is to go through someone else's property. But the answer is tough luck. So basically, all right, yeah. Well, if you want to let your kid die, all right. Well, that's your deal. So William Evans says, I DM'd Ancat with my server link because I don't have self-promo perms. Oh, you have to click content creator role when you go to the welcome in my server. My bad on that, for not telling you. Okay, anyway, but like for this hypothetical, I mean, that's your deal, but that's also to say like, Are you going to say as well that you can use your property to like enclose somebody else within your property, and then it's tough luck that they actually can't leave anymore because of that, or what? Like,
If you built your homestead and then I built a cube around your property going like above and below and all around, and this is a challenge that I heard to me, and I'm just like, I don't fucking know. I don't care about this shit. I've heard like a blocking proviso. I've heard that just as like a statement. I don't know what it means. Thoughts on that?
The answer is that you can use your property aggressively or like coercively. Like you can, yes, like literally like enclosing somebody within property is doing that very thing. Like, have you, like, you know about the flagpole example?
No, I don't know that.
Like where basically like you've fallen from a building and like you grab onto a flagpole as you're falling down, and then you're like basically outside of somebody's apartment. But if you let go of the flagpole, you will drop and die. And like, but the only other way to like actually, you know, get through anywhere is to go through somebody's open window into their apartment and just leave. Like right. The idea that somebody is like keeping you out of their apartment and forcing you to just drop yourself is the problem, not the like, you know, not the fact that you like it's you're literally just trying to get through their apartment just to get out. You know what I mean? It's not like you're trying to stay there. Like if you were trying to like stay there beyond the fact that you just needed to survive, then
yeah, that would be aggression.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, you can use property in aggressive ways, just like, you know, if you rightfully own a gun, but if you're using that in an aggressive way,
I can trespass my knife into your liver.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, like that's obvious that you could use property in aggressive ways, but
right,
just the spatial sort of aspect of property.
Speaking of that, guys, what's the deal with abortion?
Based
baby killing.
I'm just kidding.
What the fuck?
No, I'm just kidding.
No, I actually thought of that because, like, you know, the whole like evictionism argument. I thought as well, like, what of the argument that like basically the mom would be essentially using like her property essentially, like if you're looking at it that way, to like kill the child. Like by removing it from there, like basically like not letting it live by like forcibly removing it and killing it.
You can remove it. You can't like kill it as you remove it. Like it cannot be an objective to kill it as you're removing it. But you can.
Well, I was going to
remove it.
I was going to bring up another example to support this. I'm not saying like removing it, like, you know, when it's viable. I'm saying like, for example, you know how there's this Ancat, this was an SO server. Somebody was talking about like basically somebody was making the case. I don't think it was somebody in the server. I think they were critiquing somebody that had said like basically to remove your baby from your property, you should like justifiably, like some Ancap said this, you should justifiably be allowed to like stab it because it's not leaving. Like, I think the same thing of that. Like, I'm not sure. Like, I think like if I propose that argument, I feel like it actually has like a ground to stand on.
But believe it or not, and this is, you know, this is gonna shock you guys coming from me, but like I don't even have really a well thought out opinion on abortion yet.
Yeah,
and
that's why I kind of brought up that point, because I had just thought of this and I was wondering what you thought of what I said.
Because I can sort of see cases on both sides, but I'm not like, again, like even though I think I know a good amount about like property and stuff, I don't really think I have a good, like I need to be more familiar with a lot more with libertarian ethics and property rights and stuff like that in order to like really get like a grasp on whether or not abortion is murder.
There was the principle of least harm that I've heard. I don't necessarily know how it's rooted in argumentation ethics or anything else like that, or in libertarian ethics. But there's that, so it's like you can use only like the least harmful way that is effective for maintaining your property rights. And like say like the least harmful way you can remove this baby from the woman is with a knife. Stab it and then just like wriggle it around and then pull it out. And it's just like, that seems like it would kind of harm the lady, but sure, yeah. And then I've heard another example where it's just like if you owned property on the moon and somebody went to the moon and trespassed on your property, and the only way you could enforce it is by nuking the moon. Can you nuke the moon? And I've heard someone reply yes, and I'm just like,
bro,
that's a little weird.
Nuke your own property if a baby won't get off it.
Yeah, it's the whole thing of just like, oh, you trespassed on my property, recreational McNuke time.
Well, as long as like the nuke fumes don't get in anybody's house or anything like that, you know.
Yeah. Nuke fumes.
But evictionism, it's like whether or not the end state of the baby outside of the womb, like once it is removed for trespass, quote unquote, is death, you still have the right to remove it. It's the same like if you had a cabin in Alaska and somebody trespassed on your property and like fell asleep or whatever, like got knocked out cold, and it's fucking like blizzard outside, you still have the right to remove them from your property, even if it's just like you're gonna be leaving them outside, and it's just like, oh, they can't necessarily like get to anywhere else or like get not cold.
Dick move.
Yeah, dick move.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, there are just a lot of hardcore Ancaps who tend to, I guess you could call them the more like, I guess, thin boys, but the ones who just literally think that nothing is. But like, because they don't separate between ethics and morality, they just think that they're just this one hegemonic hive mind. So they just think that, oh yeah, no, like, yeah, drinking while you're pregnant, totally fine. Is it aggressive? That's really all that matters. Being a fucking loud, obnoxious neighbor, I don't really care. Doesn't really matter. That's totally fine. Drinking and driving, actually based, but
it is. No.
You know, but like they just think that all of these things are just totally nothing. Basically, nothing matters outside the NAP to them, and that just seems really, really odd and ridiculous to me.
I think it's mostly just autism.
Yeah.
This is like what they could justify, so that's the only thing.
So Tao is voting for Hillary. This is amazing.
I think he's
incredible. We're saved.
He's stacking in one of my servers.
I don't know who that is.
He's a fucking troll.
Let's see. So yes, he's voting for Hillary. Let's see. Y'all ready for the Democratic primary debate?
Oh God. This is gonna be like RFK, and then that's it.
Man, well, Joe, I think your problem is here, bud. You shit your pants. I can smell it, and it's actually making my condition worse.
Audio deepfakes of RFK now.
Really, there are.
No,
I mean, I've seen one.
How do you even do that?
Like,
there's like,
how do you even do that? I
don't think that or something where it's like, I think you're able to do that.
But, well, no, I'm just saying, like, I can see AI sort of recreating Biden or Trump, but like with RFK, it sounds like he's in an earthquake. You know, like how does AI recreate that? Like when he talks.
In an earthquake.
Well, they're able to do.
You need to like put that in the text. You need to put like extra commas and like the stutter sort of shit.
Yeah, make him stutter.
I don't think they use text.
Jitter like an earthquake.
I'm pretty sure like almost all of it is just people saying it and then essentially doing an impression while they say it to basically get that generated. I don't like. I have not.
You can
seen
have it
people doing
completely synthesized. Those are usually worse.
I have not seen people using that because of how bad it would be. Especially like you would need a bunch of training for that, wouldn't you? Like it wouldn't be as simple as the other ones that people are doing with limited training.
I'm uncertain. Like, what do you mean? Like, is
like
the other ones?
Because
like,
you'd have to put more. Like, I assume you'd have to put like more hours of content in, and like it'd have to like go through all of that before it actually be better with the actual text itself.
Somewhat.
Okay. Let's see.
I don't know.
Let's see. Trump won't do a debate, and neither will Biden. I think. Why would they when they are polling so well? Yeah. Let's see. So, isn't Trump going to the debate? Trump is doing Trump is doing an interview with Tucker, I believe it is, while the other ones are going on a Fox News debate. Let's see. And look, for anti-establishment Tucker, right? Of course, that's going to happen. Let's see. So y'all don't believe in property rights? We do. That's actually tough. Yeah. So
I think they're just trolling. They have to be.
Bro. Okay. So I posted my link in the
trolling.
server. Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure that's an actual like criticism that the other guys might think. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Based on what was posted before. Posted my link in the server. All right. Let's see. Man, it sucks when statist is more principled on property rights than Ancap's LMAO. Let's see. So
just ignore him.
These responses are not principled. If you have principled and justification for such, then stick to it. Once again, using property in aggressive ways is pro-conflict.
Yeah, we're saying
we agree
that.
With the last part. Yeah, I don't remember not agreeing with the last.
Yeah, part. I don't know exactly what the disagreement is there.
He's just saying things that we've said and we agree with that are libertarian and saying you're not principled.
I think it's just like he's not quoting necessarily what he's responding to. So we're getting confused.
Also, I'd recommend you learn about forestalling if you want to have a better understanding of capitalism. Okay.
I saw it was like a old English common law thing that we're probably using for a different context.
Law?
Do you understand what that means in that context though?
I read it. I forgot it already.
Cool.
Okay, I have it on Wikipedia. I'll look it up later.
Sure. Well, actually, you should look it up and tell us while we're reading comments here.
right.
Let's see. Carson Allworth POV. You get your theory from. I was about to say white videos, YouTube videos, bro. That's how they spell white on Twitter.
White T.
They. That's how they spell white on Twitter. Bro, at Tao, I'm continually disappointed by people claiming to be on the same side as actual Ancaps. Yeah, I think they're talking about the baby stabber. Let's see. Yep. Anyways, about abortion killing someone violates the NAP.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ironic
that's
to
too
like
broad of a
say that you're.
So it's just like if someone is trying to kill you and then you kill them, that doesn't violate the NAP. It's just like no, that killing someone is just too general of a term to say it violates the NAP. That's just not enough.
Yo, staying awake violates the NAP. the NAP.
Actually, falling asleep, is consistent with the NAP.
Only true Ancaps fall asleep.
Bro, nap. I already got a full night rest. What do I need that for? If you take a baby out of the womb without killing them, then you didn't kill them, and you're ethically okay. I mean, I definitely agree with that. Like, that's. I don't think there's any disagreement here on that. Anyway, drinking and driving isn't an issue, bro. I like it. Like
True.
Everyone says, bro. Everyone has said it at this point. It's not the drunk drivers. It's the drunk crashers. It's obvious. And I don't really like it. It needs to be an unspoken rule at this point. I'm tired of having to hear it because it's just so true. Let's see,
I mean, people like always castigate the drunk drivers, but will
the most oppressed
but not yeah, after gamers, of course. But like, you can drink and drive and not crash, and you can be sober while crashing. So it's not the drunk people, it's the crashers.
That was the best argument so far. Okay, let's see. So private roads will have rules and regulations. I mean,
By the property owner, yeah.
Ancat, what's your take on roads at this point? Like, are you still on the train of like unowned, or it was like null owned property?
Who will build them? I honestly haven't thought about the whole roads thing in a while. I mean, I normally just laugh off most, like, when I think of roads, I just think of like who will build the roads sort of thing. I don't know. Like,
roads
you can
need to
build
be
roads,
maintained, right?
Huh?
Roads need to be maintained, right?
What are you replying to? Like,
no, because if
like
they're
you're
null
talking
owned,
about
like if
who
they're
will
not
build the
owned, he's
roads.
saying that they won't be upheld. Like the like tragedy of the commons.
Oh,
it's not
like,
just about
yeah.
who
So,
okay.
oh yeah. So well, if something's unowned, if it's like a commons, that doesn't mean that you can't like build on it or
Okay, so I'll
even
homestead it.
use it. Huh?
It's mine now. I'll homestead it. It's mine now.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, you could just build more road around it.
It would depend on what you're homesteading, I guess.
I'm homesteading the road. It's mine now.
All right, that's fine.
So then
you
you
could
have
just build a
roads.
section of road next to that road that like connects from the end part where you don't own it all the way around back to where
No,
you
just like
don't
homestead
own
the
it.
entire road.
Like, yeah, you can own like the concrete and shit.
Yeah, like I'll just build you'll have your road like
with.
this, like you own this part, and then I'll just like you don't own here and here. I'll just build road that like stretches here, and then I'll just go on the rest of the road like that.
Yeah,
Also,
I mean, imagine some
road
roads
goes a bit
will
like
be
deeper
like,
down. You need to at least compact the earth, but there's like there's a bit more to roads than that.
But point being, it's like there's not going to be a toll road everywhere because you can just like find other ways of transporting yourself that's not on somebody's road.
Yeah, I don't think that like all roads will be like a commons. I don't think. I mean, maybe some will. I think Kevin Carson argues that a lot of roads would be commons. I forget the argument that he makes, but I'll see if I can find the article. But that's all I can really. That's the only theorist I can think of who's like talking about roads.
My point here was maybe that it won't actually be very beneficial for everybody to own roads because like there will just be alternative, like first of all, ways around the road itself, and then also just like alternative modes of transportation, especially as we'll be able to just not have to necessarily use cars anymore.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean we'll just not have to use cars anymore? Cars are relatively efficient.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying like public transit or something like that. I'm just saying like we might have alternative means of transporting ourselves that are better than cars. Like I'm not necessarily making a hypothetical of exactly what that'll be. I'm just saying that that's like saying, oh well, horses are getting us around. How exactly will we get around without the horses? Like what will we do next? Yeah, and then cars came along. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a better way than cars of getting yourself around. And I mean that would kind of like maybe there would be a point in which you don't need to worry about the roads.
Still think
I could see that.
Yeah, exactly. Like
That's a long
I don't know
time off.
That's very
Well,
yeah,
not
probably
necessarily.
maybe. I don't know.
Anyway, so you don't want
terms
people increasing your accident rates, LMAO. Okay. Was the colonization of the Americas justified by Ancap ethics? Yeah, it totally is, man. No.
Some of the land wasn't used by natives just because the natives say, like, we own here to here because we fought a war with it. That's not necessarily a true property claim. If they homestead the land, they homestead the land, but much of the land that they didn't. So the settlers who created homesteads on the land, that is justified in terms of like the government saying, we own America from
They didn't
sea
have
to shining sea.
decrees.
No.
They didn't have decrees establishing that what property was defined as there, so we were able to just take it from them.
That's not what I'm saying at all.
No. I'm not saying that's what you're saying. I'm just saying, like, this guy is obviously not just talking about like, like just expanding on the actual, stuff that was unowned itself. I'm talking about the actual like stuff that the people that were like actually there.
Gotcha.
Okay, and then also like, okay, actually a bigger problem I see with this I said bigger. Okay, B, is that what you're talking about here when you say colonization of the Americas. I mean, like, yes, there were people doing that, but I mean, it was like overseen, by the government itself in a lot of ways. So like, in that, it's just, is that necessarily something you'd view as ethical, that like the government is saying like, okay, well now do this and that, like when it comes to what land you should claim?
Saying like you can claim any land like within Louisiana Purchase or something like that.
Exactly. Exactly. Like purchasing the land and then saying, okay, well now do this, now go in the land.
The homesteaders had the right to homestead whether the government said they did or not.
Yeah, well, the natives were treating the land basically as a commons, sort of
Not
like
all of them,
how
but some.
Yeah, some, not because there were. I always tend to make the mistake of as like viewing, and a lot of people do this too, of like viewing all natives as being this like hegemonic group.
Hey,
like
hold up, bro, look
hey,
what Zulu is in
up?
here. Can the Agorist explain why exactly it is what exactly is incorrect about anarcho-capitalism? What makes agorism not anarcho-capitalism?
Damn, it's crazy that Zoo is here.
Hold up, let's
Oh
catch
yeah,
up
I
on the
remember.
comments.
Okay, they weren't necessarily slandering you.
What was that?
But they were.
Huh?
I was in Zulu's server. This was a little bit ago, at least before Rev. And they were talking about you, and they didn't realize that they were talking about you specifically. And I realized it. It was hilarious because they were talking to each other about how you kept slandering Hoppa's name.
Slandering Hoppa and his glorious writings. So basically, just agorism is
hold up. Let me just like get past these like 3 comments and then you can do it. So this is really soothing to listen to you. You guys should make ASMR. We got Ty in here. What's up? Do you ever come to the streams? This is like your first comment here. Where we're going, we don't need roads. Okay. And then to be fair, I think there's a lot of regulation keeping alternative modes of transportation back. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off or anything, but like there were people that commented before Zulu. I just thought it was crazy that he was here. So, but go ahead and explain. Yeah, you lurk. Okay, cool. Let's see. So can the Agorist explain what exactly is incorrect about anarcho-capitalism? What makes agorism not anarcho-capitalism?
So agorism basically, I guess to summarize it up very briefly, is another branch of. So if we're looking at like the position that Murray Rothbard, for example, established in the 1960s, which was to essentially synthesize libertarian ethics and the Austrian method around a consistent framework. Essentially, agorism is just another branch of that of Rothbard's initial, I guess, contribution to libertarianism. So a good way to view the agorist take as opposed to the Ancap take would be that agorism is basically just. I mean, I don't want to say anarcho-capitalism, but I prefer the term Austro-libertarianism. But essentially, agorism at its core is just Austro-libertarianism, but it applies praxeology consistently to organization theory. And essentially what that does is it essentially adds another, like a third layer to Austro-libertarianism, and it's what allows us to come to the conclusion that, political means aren't Well, not that they aren't justified, but that it allows us to study the state with a bit more depth than I think a lot of ANCAPs tend to do, and why agorists tend to root out politics as a viable means, because we have this understanding of the state that makes us understand that, you know, electing a Ron Paul or electing a, you know, the right candidate isn't going to solve the problem, if that makes sense.
Do you understand this understanding of understanding?
Yeah. But yeah, that's really all it is. I mean, and of course there are like other entailments that come along with that sort of make agorists, you know, tend to have conflicts with anarcho-capitalism. But that's really the bulk of it. And this is sort of why Konkin, for instance, it's sort of why Konkin explained it as, you know, him being more Rothbardian than Rothbard. You know, basically it's what he called a consistent form of, you know, Rothbardianism.
I foresee a question regarding like what specifically this understanding of organization theory is.
So like a good example would be we look at states primarily through I guess a good way to kind of bounce off of this would be and I think I was going to bring this up anyway with the stream. Austrians tend to make the distinction between, like Ignis, you're familiar with the Austrian take on, and again, like I'm not like a big, you know, don't call me like a big Austrian guy understanding of, yeah, you know, understanding of the method, but like, are you familiar with the Austrian explanation of preference? Like how we would say someone has a preference for something?
I mean, like they have a hierarchy of desires, the topmost one being the one that they act towards. And then like just because time is scarce, they have to like rank those in the order that they would do them.
Right, yeah, so marginal utility. Yeah, so essentially preference according to the Austrians would be demonstrated through action. Right? So for instance, like you can let's say, I don't know, you're eating ice cream, or you're, I don't know, fucking picking the difference between chocolate and, yeah, let's say you're you know, you're choosing between chocolate and vanilla, right? And you know, let's say for some reason that you really, really want vanilla, but everyone in your friend group wants you to get chocolate and are peer pressuring you to get chocolate, you know, so you prefer vanilla in one sense of preference, that you actually think that it tastes better, but you know, for whatever reason, you also kind of want to appease your friends, so you end up choosing chocolate, right? So in some sense, you could say that in your own head, ideologically, you might have wanted vanilla, but your actual preference, according to Austrians, would be chocolate, because you demonstrated that through your actions. You know, we can't read your mind.
I would have chosen chocolate. So you hold it in your head that I want chocolate. Yeah, I know this.
Right. So what's really interesting is that insight is actually really, really useful, especially when you apply it to something like politicians. So for instance, we can talk about someone like, you know, like most ANCAPs and most Austro-libertarians tend to know very well, like Barack Obama went on the campaign trail, you know, had this ideological platform of being, you know, anti-war, anti-intervention. We're not going to be like the Bushes. We're gonna be different. You know, we're gonna be pro-human and get our Nobel Peace Prize for it and shit. You know, so he had this, you know, and so he went into office with this ideology, and you know,
I don't know how much he was like real about that either. I don't know much.
Yeah, and he could have been fake, but let's say that he was actually genuine for the sake of argument, right? Like he genuinely thought that this was a good way to go about it. And I'm sure there have probably been presidents before who have been like genuine about it, you know. You know, I don't think like every single person who's gotten elected, you know, was just, and I tricked you guys the whole time. I actually was a pro-war, you know. So if you actually, for instance, assume that she was actually being genuine, I think there was a story that I heard. I can't remember where I heard this, but basically he went into office sort of, and his administration, wanting to plan out this, you this campaign of like, ending the spying, ending the interventions, ending X, Y, and Z. And he was basically approached by these like, oh, I think it was Snowden who sort of mentioned this, but regardless, he was basically approached by these hardened veterans who have been in positions of power in the government, in like the military and like the CIA, other organizations who've been there for decades, basically came to tell him like, hey, I know you have these goals, but look, this is, these things need to be in place for the safety of, us, for the safety of maintaining the state and maintaining this organization and maintaining, other platform and goals that you might want to accomplish. So, at the very end of the day, sort of, I guess I'll end the tangent here by basically saying that, even though Obama, for instance, or any candidate has the set ideology, what really matters is what they actually do in office. And the problem is that while you're an agent of the government, I don't really see, while you're an agent of that organization, there are pressures all around you that force you to actually perform actions. And while you are that agent, you have to perform actions that are at the very least conform to sustaining the organization itself. So I think that's what we should really be focusing on. You can have this ideology, but ultimately what matters is what you actually do. And if you sign up to become a government agent or a cop,
I think
you're
you're just
demonstrating in your
generalizing too much
actions that
because even in giving your like Obama example, he's just like, okay, yes to everything except bombing these children in particular. Every other family, fuck them. These children, I like these. Like you could do that with any like set of children that like just like no, I won't approve this drone bombing. No, because I work for the state, I have to approve every single drone bombing. No, you
I
don't
don't even
because
think
you do
that.
everything. So it's
Yeah, I
just
mean,
like
and
I don't think you have like a two. What would it even be? I don't think you have like a deductive argument to say like, oh, therefore this action will occur.
I don't think that I'm not really saying that, you know, like oh well, they're all like just being deliberate, like in every single action they're just thinking in their head, oh well, what's going to benefit the state today. I'm just saying that in their actions, by working for this organization, through their actions, they are performing means that aren't going to achieve any kind of end that would subvert the state in any meaningful way. Like, does
Can a
that make sense?
CEO act in a way that ends to the end of the business?
I mean, I think that they can. I mean, I guess they can to some extent. Yeah, they
They
can.
can to like the total extent. A CEO can fuck up the business, even if it's like a huge business.
I mean, I think that, yeah,
That's an
that's true.
organization, same sort of deal. So like, what argument do you have like not true of the state?
Well, I think that they're like specifically when regards to the state. I don't even. I mean, maybe I guess the CEO could maybe. With the CEO, I don't think that like it could be true that maybe this this one individual just has every single autonomy. I think that they can contribute to maybe like mistakenly fucking up some kind of instance. But I think with regards to I guess like a
Can a head of state pull an oopsie doopsie and then it leads to the end of the state?
yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe not like the end of the state. I mean, I think they can make mistakes. Like a military general, for instance, can make like mistakes, for instance. You know.
Yeah, that should. So why can't the oopsie doopsie be intentional?
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that there aren't like they're not like outliers. I'm just saying that we can point to specifically the incentives that like a politician might take when they take power, that compel them to act in certain ways. So for instance, maintaining the welfare warfare state, maintaining the maintaining the inflationary sector of the economy, for instance. This is something that we've seen throughout throughout history that doesn't really change. And I don't think you can attribute that just to
Okay, but that's
the
a
people in
historicism
power,
argument.
the people in power being the wrong people.
That's an inductive argument rather than a deductive. So it isn't your conclusion isn't necessarily like true. You
What do
can
you
generally hold it as like probable at most.
what do you mean by that?
where it's just like, okay, so it happened. Say it's just like this happened. Just say like a black swan fallacy, where it's just like, I've went out and gone swan sighting, bird watching or whatever the fuck of swans, and I've seen only 12 white swans in my whole life, or it's just like I've seen 999 white swans, therefore no black swans exist. On the next time you see a black swan.
Yeah, no, like I'm not making like a purely, historical argument. We can point to the incentives that states as organizations have, such as continuing all these things. Yeah. I mean, well, there are things that there are things that are required for a state to function, like taxation, for instance.
Sure, and you can end taxes. Not too many instances of people ending taxes completely, except for the state dissolution, you could say.
Yeah, I mean, there are incentives to have different levels of taxation. So, for instance,
not all of them have to do with economics. A lot of them have to do with the ideology of the person in charge.
Well, are we talking about economics in the sense of
like a Laffer curve, like that,
purposeful behavior?
Sure, like I'm talking about
in a praxeological sense, because
a lot of the time you talk about sometimes, especially like with the constitutionalist conservatives, like to be like, no, taxes shouldn't be this high. They should be lower to maximize the Laffer curve so the government makes the most money from taxes. I'm like, no, taxes should be lower than that point. But it's just like not every instance of like taxes lowering or raising is about like what is best in the best interest of the state. It's what's the state actor who led that sees as in their best interest, or like whether it's like ideologically I want the state to come to this outcome or something like that, or something else like that. But,
right, and I completely agree with that, and I think that if we're talking about politicians seeking to pursue their own best interests, I think part of them pursuing their own best interests as agents of the state includes bolstering it.
In some circumstance, but not every circumstance. Again, the general circumstance would be the statist politicians. The outlier circumstance would be the anti-statist politicians.
I mean, you could point to like examples of maybe a state, for instance, collapsing. Just you could point to states historically collapsing. You could attribute that maybe to potentially mistakes on part of the the government officials leading it. But I think that we can point to the fact that I think states as organizations are just problematic models of sustaining themselves. As far as like
through aggression, but it's just like, again, it's not really.
No, I'm not talking about like an ethical sense. I'm talking about more in the actual ability to finance themselves. States just aren't. They collapse within a certain period of time. They don't really last more than 200, 300 years usually. They pretty much rely on an exponential growth curve.
I wouldn't say that's like an iron law. I would say that's more just like tendency.
I mean, maybe some states last like longer than that, like 500, 1,000 years, but typically they just end up being typically they end up just being defunct or reformed governments usually.
Defunct or what? Form of government?
Reformed, yeah, like they have entirely different political economies, different leadership, etc.
Okay, so real quick, Zulu, if he's still here, he asked, how exactly does agorism allow for a deeper understanding of the political mean/praxis than Ancaps? What understandings do the agorists get that we don't? You answered that a little bit earlier, Ancat, but if you want to keep going on that, you can.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess it would be more to the extent that I think that ANCAPs tend to not really rule out political means, and this sort of this results in a lot of issues, but primarily they tend to sort of view the state as this I don't want to say like interest neutral tool, but I think a lot of them tend to, I guess, downplay the I guess effect that, I mean, I don't want to say maybe like economic incentives, but yeah, I guess economic incentives play into how the state actually runs, and the incentives that states tend to employ on the the agents who run it, for instance. So they tend to, I guess they tend to think that we can get marginally freer by engaging in these electoral processes, when I think the Agorist critique of politics, it isn't really an ethical critique. I mean, I think Konkin made ethical critiques with regards to cops and other things like that, and I would agree, which is I think another issue with political means as a consequence that involves ethics. But I think the better critiques tend to be that engaging in these practices isn't going to accomplish what you think it will, and it's essentially a dead end that we're working toward. And there are a lot of issues with this that lead to, I think, a lot of issues that I've been endlessly critical of within the Ancat movement, of sort of accepting these very political narratives, forming these cults of personality around politicians and strongmen, and engaging and appealing to appealing to different political allegiances, like the alt-right, for instance, would be another great example of this. And I mean, there have been problems more, I guess, and these are more like moral and I guess group issues, with regard to, like, I guess, the strength of the movement and the sort of demographics that we appeal to. But
are you talking about like Ancap's appealing to the alt-right?
Yeah, that would probably be one example.
I would say just like it depends on your definition of alt-right, but yeah, there's a lot of the fucking Ancap discords, and I wouldn't necessarily say issues, but tendency to post like fucking Nazi memes and shit. That's cringe as hell. But I wouldn't necessarily like a decent definition I heard for the alt-right is just like the desire to create an ethno-state, like a white ethno-state specifically. And
yeah,
Ancap's not necessarily for that, especially fucking principled ones.
Yeah, but I think, and this is sort of why I've found Hans Hermann Hoppe to be a bit problematic, because he directly and openly appeals to this group, and there have been.
Bro, wait, what do you mean you disagree?
I would disagree. So that, like, specifically the
Did you watch Libertarianism and the Alt-Right?
Which one's that?
One of the lectures that he makes, or that he does at is that at PFS?
Yeah, it's PFS.
Okay, it's at PFS.
Might have seen it, but don't necessarily remember it.
You should watch it. You should rewatch it.
I think specifically like the white ethno-state part of it is just like, no. Disagree on that. I mean, I think the term's been propagandized to mean a bunch of shit.
I mean, he said some very shady things, even with regards to like having some kind of ethno-state, like his entire theory of immigration.
Like, you can non-aggressively have one, very hypothetically.
What?
I want to fucking live.
Were you reading a comment?
No, he's not. He's saying you could hypothetically have one, but it's like very uncommon. That was his point.
No, like his argument for instance, immigration, and I think if Zulu were here, he would. I don't know if he would agree that Hoppe's.
No, he wouldn't. He made a video about it.
No, I'm just saying that, like, I don't know if he would agree about Hoppe promoting some pretty sketchy things with regards to his takes on immigration, but he said things to the extent of, modeling an immigration policy favoring Europeans, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can find I have the quotes. I can find them, but it would take a long time to read because they're pretty big. But
this reminds me of that. I was just gonna say, it reminds me of the conversation with Praxben on Twitter, where you were telling him about Hoppe or something, and then Hoppe was saying like there are like genetic differences based on race or something like that, and then Ben's like, well, like he posts some like research paper saying like it can be genetic or cultural, and then we were asking him, okay, well, is it genetic or is it cultural? He's like, why does it matter? Why does it matter?
Why does which part matter?
Like, he's like, why does it matter? Like, it's pretty like clear that Hoppe, like, is right when he's saying that there are differences in the races. So like, why does it really matter if it's genetic or cultural or whatever?
I mean, just because... like there are Like,
because one of them is racist.
there's no.
I don't know.
Like, there's differences between like just okay. So there's no definition of a race. That's just like concrete, finite, anything like that. There are differences in gene expressions between a person with a darker complexion and lighter complexion. In terms of like melanin coding for like melanin content or whatever. There are also like a bunch of other differences in terms of predisposition to certain diseases, sensitivities to other things like that. Like this is known within medical science, and it's a problem if you have like a sample size of just like white college age males. That is known within medical science. What specifically you're referring to? There's just like
Okay, we were talking about intellect and like
intellect?
like actual like it's not about like or
I mean, those
physical.
Eastern Europeans, they bring the white IQ down on these studies. But I mean, just like
it's not exactly about that. No, well, it's not even about that.
Well, it's the problem that a lot of racists use to it's the Mott Bailey tactic that Hoppe also engages in, where he sort of says, he sort of implies that people attacking his arguments are ridiculous for, I'm just arguing. I just think that. Do you not think that there are average differences in IQ and between races? But when you actually
think there
like
are average differences.
no,
in
I
IQ?
do.
Okay.
No, I do. I mean, there are
You
problems with
accept that
IQ
races
even
are
being
real? Oh, you're a racist. This
Dude,
motherfucker.
unreal.
This motherfucker right here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what we're critiquing, if that was all he was arguing, like, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I mean, I think that I guess him more appealing to a lot of these racist demographics would be a problem, but I wouldn't really have an inherent problem with the argument. I'm more concerned about the genetic arguments. This appeals to like Lamarckism and shit like that.
I still don't.
I
I've
think
heard your
has a
like
problem.
arguments for like the Lamarckism thing, like him talking about like the natural and social laws or whatever the fuck like that. I don't think that's Lamarckism. I don't think he's talking about Lamarckism there.
I mean, I guess what would he? I guess what's he talking about when he's referring to IQ being biological and genetic and like
It has a heritability of
and the
0.8
natural.
at tops.
No, but there's a difference between heritability and genetics.
That's genetic. No, like in that paper, it talked about the general heritability being like all genetic factors. In the paper.
So okay, so you're using like heritability and genetics interchangeably.
The paper did, yes.
Okay, was that the paper that you cited? I think
it was the paper that I cited. Yeah, it was talking. It went. I don't think it was a meta-analysis, but analyzed twin studies, like twins who were separated from their parents, adopted separately, and then studied over time and to see like how their IQs matched over their age range. When they were like 5, it was very environmentally influenced. When they were like 20, it was like very, very genetically influenced, genetically correlated.
Okay, so
each other.
So you're saying that he is arguing that like that intelligence and other traits are genetic, but that it's true.
Intelligence and other,
because I'm not like trying to argue that if it's true one way or the other. I have my own opinions on it. I'm just trying to. You're saying that he's not. You were saying earlier, seemingly, that he's not making the argument that like IQ and shit and things like that are genetically determined.
Not completely, but partially.
Whereas, yeah, so like arguing that, for instance, like IQ is basically that some genetic populations are inherently to some extent more intelligent than others. That is a race. That is a.
I wouldn't take it as like a population standpoint. I mean, they're all fucking individuals. You're gonna have just like a difference of variance. But if you're gonna have a
you have outliers,
gene pool of people who are isolated, and you can have however many confounding variables. But if you're gonna have just like different sets of people, it is possible for them to have a different average or different mean, and as well as different variances in the standardization of intelligence.
Yeah, so if you took like a group of white people and a group of black people, averaged out their environmental factors X, Y, and Z, there would still be differences. I mean, not just like marginal
Possibly.
differences, but pretty vast differences in IQ,
I mean, if you
because
took like
IQ is genetic.
Eastern Europeans whose ancestors were fucking the punching bag of the USSR, and then just like fucking, I don't know, UK black gentlemen, and then you took IQ tests of them, I don't know how that would turn out. It's possible that the black gentleman can score higher.
I don't know. Have you heard drill?
I have no idea what the fuck you're referring
Drill
to.
music.
No, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah, but like I'm just saying that if you're arguing that certain races would inherently have lower IQs, even if you cancel out environmental factors, that is inherently saying that some races just have better, are just inherently more intelligent.
I think races
like genetically
still like
determined.
the wrong like area of analysis. You could say like specifically the lineage of like certain individuals, and you can say that within like say white people, or like specifically it's also like white people as a group, very very broad, and especially if you include Eastern Europeans, it takes down the IQ by like 10 points. You can have the people of Appalachia within the United States. They have low IQs. They're very distant from other people. Thomas Sowell like talks about this a lot when he's referring to IQ, where it's just like when you have isolation of a gene pool, then you're going to have a lowering of IQ, especially in just several different aspects.
Yeah, and but again, I mean, you could also attribute that to environment, but then there's sort of the problem that I think this gets into, where if you're going to make that point,
like
you
of
have
an individual, you can study how much is environment and how much is genetic, especially.
Yeah, so Hoppe isn't denying that environment plays a factor, but he's saying that genetics also plays a factor. And I'm
Hoppe's
saying
original
that
point is that people who are high status, the elites of society, their children tend to be the elites too, and that is due to, in part, the genetic or heritability of intelligence, as well as that parent probably wants the best for that kid, and the best for that kid is probably being an elite for that society. So he just trains him to be that elite. So he has the nature and nurture pushing that kid to take the father spot in the elite role of society. And I don't think that's Lamarckism.
I'm familiar with the argument, but I don't really see. So, for instance, like
a kid of two parents whose IQs
I'm just
like
trying to like
75
figure
and
out,
80, does he have an equal chance
right,
of becoming an elite, becoming like high on the social like not even caste, like social hierarchy of like some competence hierarchy? Does he have an equal chance of getting that high compared to a kid of parents of, say, even just like 110 and 130 IQ who are already high up in that social strata, who have a kid? Do they have equal chances of becoming elites?
I'd have more a problem with, I guess, IQ even as a like factor of
IQ
I guess
predicts
social
for success in life.
In what way?
Up to a certain part. If you're like fucking 165 IQ, you're likely to go Ted Kaczynski on everybody's ass. I think he had like 167 or some shit.
He was experimented on. That's what he did. That's
yeah.
I mean, I think there are problems with. I mean, I'm not again like I'm not that familiar with. I guess IQ. I would have problems specifically with, I guess the way that they do testing, for instance. So for
there's
instance,
Raven's matrices, which
they'll
is
take
not language based. It is purely about pattern recognition, and it's like it's not biased.
What was that?
There's Raven's matrices, which is like considered like the most objective test, I'm pretty sure, where it's like it's not language based. It's literally just like an array of like 9 boxes, 3x3 grid, and you just see you try to understand 8 boxes, and then like the bottom right, usually there's the continuation of the pattern, and then you like pick like between 5 options A through E, which box continues the pattern.
Okay, like yeah, that's fair, and I would need to probably look into that, to be honest, because I'd be interested to see. I mean, are the
just pattern recognition?
Because I know that there are different like I'm pretty sure that there are different forms of IQ tests, aren't there? That like
There's
rely on
linguistic
language.
Have you taken an
IQ,
IQ
which is the
test?
part that I think the Jews get. Oh, I forget if that's what
Huh?
Jews get are high on.
I was saying, have you taken an IQ test before?
I haven't. No.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm
I've
just
taken
no,
some of like
I'm
the
just
online
I'm
ones.
just
I
curious.
never pay for them though.
I'm just curious because I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, because it sounded like you didn't know, and I was like,
Because
he
I know
hasn't
that
taken
there
an
are.
IQ test before.
I don't think I ever have. No.
So anyway,
Do you
like
think
I
the
you
Jews,
would be
genuinely
on it?
don't know what. I
happened
genuinely
about the
don't know
Jews,
what my
Ignis?
IQ is.
Do you
What
think
happened
you would
about
get
the
a B
Jews?
on the test?
Well, I know that that's not how IQ is scored, but
No, like an 80
um
through 89.
oh
I kid.
probably, I don't know.
But there's like in terms of like IQ tests that are usually administered for studying IQ across populations, there's like spatial IQ, there's like linguistic IQ, and then a bunch of other stuff like that. In terms of like the language test, it's like, let me give you this word, say like ubiquitous, and then let me give you like 3 other words. Tell me which word is like closest in meaning to that. And with that, you have to have like an understanding of the English fucking language. So it's just like
Right.
that's like crystallized knowledge. That's not fluid knowledge. That's not like
Right.
IQ itself.
Right.
But that's like partially pattern recognition still. But that I have like more of an issue with. That's why like just the Ravens matrices one.
Right. And what do like I guess do most studies based it on what's it called, the Ravens matrix?
Ravens matrices.
Do a lot of studies tend to disregard other forms of IQ tests because of those problems with language, with a lot of the ways that they're structured?
Some
As
of
far
them.
as like studies saying oh, this IQ is tied to X, Y, and Z social factors because we're basing it off of these specific IQs or IQ tests. I mean, do
Some
they
of the time, I'm
exclude?
not certain which ones do or not. But what I would say is like it's just
Because
that
I think that
Ravens matrices
go
I'd
ahead.
say is the most objective. It has like the least amount of bias in it. You could still train for the test. If you train for the test, you can still increase
Right.
your IQ by like 5 points or something like that. And then it's just like how much of that is um, a flaw of the test, and then how much of that is just human cleverness.
Yeah, because like to clarify, I'm not like I'm not like really opposed necessarily one way or the other, and I'm not that, and I'm admittedly not very educated on the topic, so I'm more interested in getting to the bottom of, I guess, what the actual truth is behind some of these studies that you're presenting, for instance.
Okay.
With
Say, like,
regards to
IQ
the
is
whole
just pattern recognition, and then you can apply it to literally everything. Like that's what intelligence is, I would say. It's just like if
yeah,
you're able to recognize patterns and then act based off of them, take
is
your
it just
human action, use your intelligence.
is it
Then
just like pattern recognition though? Like what would
I would say so, yeah.
So you're saying racists have
because
really high IQ?
No, not necessarily.
They recognize
wouldn't
patterns.
would that be one of the implications though, if IQ was at least in part genetic, that certain races, genetic makeups would have an
Oh, he said
inherently.
racists.
Yeah,
have high-
racists.
Oh, racist. I thought
No,
you said
not necessarily,
races.
no.
I was gonna say like
I mean, like
Yeah.
everyone has like a
because
decently high IQ. Not everyone. There's some genetic anomalies, and
because
by that
wouldn't
I mean
because
like 50 IQ people.
I'm just worried about like wouldn't that be the implication though?
That some races have a high IQs.
Yeah, would just inherently
I
be
mean,
more intelligent
kind of.
than others. Yeah, I mean, so I don't, and again, like that's specifically like what, for instance, Hoppe, and that's why I think Hoppe comes to a lot of the conclusions that he does about specific groups of people in some of those edgy quotes in things like Gaining Libertarianism Right or like Democracy of the God That Failed. And I think why a lot of alt-righters tend to be attracted to him, because not only does he favor pro-white immigration biases, or sorry, pro-intelligence biases that just
Pro-European.
happen to be more European, because Europeans are smarter than black people. I just think
I'm
that
quoting
kind
you
of
on that.
leads to some pretty,
I
please
mean, if you want,
pretty pretty weird conclusions.
If you want to be a social engineer and only take like the most meritocratic, you shouldn't base it off of groups. You should base it off individuals. But if you're going to base it off of groups, then you're going to be so say you had a lineup of like I don't know. Say you had like a South Sudanese man in front of you.
Right.
And say you had just an average not average, but random South Sudanese man and a random like Brit or random like Western European in front of you. And you were to guess like the Brit each time for who's more intelligent.
Right. I'd still choose
based off the stuff.
I'd still choose the Brit, but not because like I think that Brits have more genetically like better genes. I would more attribute that to environment.
Okay. So sure,
I'm more of an environmentalist, considering
if you're getting in the mind of the social engineer who wants to just engineer society so that you're importing the smart people or whatever, then that person, given those predispositions, which we disagree with, would choose that path.
Right, and I think it would be problematic because he would be basing these on groups to begin. Well, I guess not.
I would say the social engineering part and using an aggressive border policy is the more issue.
Huh?
I would say the social engineering part and trying to use an aggressive border policy to enforce it is the issue.
Right.
Okay, so we're gonna get back to the chat here. We have a few more. Let's see. So Gaines and Dame said the panel should list their favorite Austrian thinkers.
I'll say Hoppe, not necessarily first being the best, but Hoppe, Rothbard, Mises. Yeah.
I mean, I think a top 3 list in any Austrian should most certainly include Mises, just considering all of the things that he's contributed to.
He's the daddy of Austria.
Well, what about Menger though?
Yeah, I'd pick. I haven't
read any Menger.
So as far as like just where if we're talking about contributions, I think you could arguably put Menger in the top 3.
I would,
just given basically starting from nothing, creating the Austrian school, and contributing all these great things. I think that there's a good argument to be put that Menger could be in the top 3.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Even though the Austrian school has moved in leaps and bounds beyond Menger. I know Esso's a big Lockman fan, but I'm not familiar with Lockman's work, so I don't know that I'd be able to Ludwig Lockman. I don't know if I'd be able to rank him. I guess if we're talking about like more modern Austrians, Roderick Long, Per Byland, Bob Murphy are probably my top 3.
Oh yeah, Bob Murphy and Bloch are really good. Walter Bloch.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Roderick particularly because I think he gives really good lectures, specifically going into like the more nitty gritty of sort of the more philosophical side of the Austrian school, which I think, and the more grounding of praxeology, as well as critiques of schools like logical positivism and a more defense of like the more Misesian tradition. So I would if you're a big Austrian nerd, just look into any like Roderick Long Mises Institute lecture.
Okay, so let's see. Ty says this is kind of off topic, but I was having a convo with someone in regards to intellectual property earlier about this. Hypothetically, if an employee breaks a non-disclosure agreement, is the employer just in using force to seize property, a sum of money maybe, from the employee? Or is it an act of disproportionate aggression because intellectual property theft, quote unquote, isn't real? Are NDA contracts in general, hold on. Are NDA contracts in general just invalid to Ancaps? At the end of the day, would ensuring contracts supersede natural law in this instance? You said go back to the beginning of this.
Yeah.
Let's see. Hypothetically, if an employee breaks a non-disclosure agreement, is the employer just in using force to seize property, a lump sum, or a sum of money maybe from the employee?
It depends on the contract. If the contract entails as such and the person signs it, then you are conditionally handing over a property right to that property of the contract. Like if you're like, okay, if I will give you this Pokemon card, and if I don't give you this Pokemon card, I'll give you $5 for the inconvenience, but otherwise I'll sell you the Pokemon card for $5. We get to the point, or like $10. We get to the point of sale. I don't have the Pokemon card on me. You own the property right to those $5 entailed by the contract. And if I don't pay it to you, that's theft.
Thoughts, Ancap?
I need to think about that one a bit more, to be honest. I don't think I have a really thought out answer. I mean, it's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, what?
Oh, I was just gonna say I have skepticisms of things like contract theory, for instance. But similarly to the
Ignis's face there.
well, similarly to the skepticism I have of
all trade takes place through contract, so that's kind of a big issue.
Wait, so like me, like so you collecting, yeah, like you collecting some oranges and I collect some apples. You want apples, I want oranges, and then we trade.
Like,
that's a contract.
I have 5 ounces of gold. I want your horse, and it's just like I'll give you these 5 ounces of gold for that horse. You give me the horse. I'm gonna keep my 5 ounces of gold. I have issues with contract theory.
Yeah, that's just a trade. I mean.
Yeah, but that's a contract.
Yeah. Okay. So if we're defining like that as an
trading of like a ownership of property or ownership.
Yeah. So if we're talking about that kind of just an actual, like an actual trade, I wouldn't disagree with that.
So what's your issue with that?
I'm just referring to like legal titles to property, for instance.
What do you mean by legal titles to property?
So for instance like a deed to a house, for instance, would be a good example.
I mean, that's just a deed takes the place of just like the evidence to the claim of ownership. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, well, who owns this piece of property? Well, I have the deed to it, and it's just like this has a proof of where it came from. This was the previous property owner, and like that's written elsewhere and that sort of shit. So it was just like it was to satisfy the evidentiary standard. Additionally,
right, but that so that would be a supplement to like to demonstrate how the property was attained.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the actual grant that itself wouldn't grant legitimacy to the property. What would be granting legitimacy to the property would be the actions taken that would cause the property to emerge.
Yeah.
Important part of this. Okay, what if the repercussion of the breach of contract is erasing? We'll say the employee, and the employee didn't thoroughly read the contract. Yeah, I mean, like, isn't that the same argument that you could sell yourself into slavery?
I mean, somewhat, but one of the things about contract theory, because the whole point of like the written contract and then signing it is to have the evidence that you consented to the contract. If you didn't, there's issues with it and everything like that. But if you are consenting to something you didn't read, there's the interpretation that, okay, well, you still agreed to it, so they're able to enforce it. Additionally, there's the other view of it is not something that you consented to, where it's just like, this contract has like 100 fucking bullet points, and then you read 5 where it's just like, you'll give me $5 if you step on my lawn, and then if you like bruise my petunias, you'll give me 10 more, and then it's just like, okay, I agree to that. And then it's just like you're only agreeing to the stuff that you are knowingly consenting to. And it's just like,
you remember the South Park
issues, but
you remember the South Park episode, the Human Centipede, where it's like, I think it was Kyle like accepts the terms of service on his iPad without reading it, but the other kids don't, because they're like, you don't read the terms of service on your iPad, and then he was the only one that accepted it when he updated, so they stuck him between 2 other people, like in a human centipede.
This is the future this is the future that Ancaps want.
Hey, so the wooden chicken says, "Hey, Ignis. Thank Tacky here. Is that how you say it? Tacky, whatever."
I don't believe you. I think you were the other guy too.
Well, he could have 2 accounts.
Yeah, exactly.
You could have this account too.
Yeah, exactly.
Switch accounts. It's easy. You just click 2 buttons. It's easy.
Fucker.
Yeah. Anyway, but can you sell yourself into slavery?
Can you sell yourself into slavery?
Yeah.
Question.
You can't. You passed the question. Yeah. Okay. There's issues with it. It's specifically, it's like selling your consent, basically, and I don't think that's necessarily something you can do. You can sell the totality of your labor, you could say, but you can't necessarily, I don't think, sell your consent, because that's not necessarily. I think that's a bit too abstract. I'm not certain, though. For any of the stuff that I've talked about in the stream thus far and anywhere else, I'm open to having the argument proven, such as like the do not aggress to save the earth sort of thing. Like, yes, that is true. And that is something I would consider. Good thing there is never a situation where you need to steal a penny to save the earth. If someone like woke me up in the middle of the night and is just like, dude, you need to steal this penny from this guy or else the earth is going to explode, I wouldn't steal the penny. 1, don't aggress. 2, I don't think the earth is going to fucking explode if you don't steal the penny.
So if you can't sell your consent, then what exactly is there, like, as far as the justification for selling like a service you'll give for, like, let's say instead like 5 years, like I'll do this for you for 5 years, or I'll do this for you for 3 years, or I'll do this for you for a year, like engaging in a contract of that sort.
That's the saying, property title to your labor.
Well,
you're selling
that. But what if like 6 months in, you're like, I no longer want to do this, and isn't that the same thing as just saying like, okay, well, I'm forever indebted to you, and like I just don't want to do this anymore?
To my knowledge, with property theory, with contract theory, if there's no out to it built in, then you can just opt out. I don't necessarily know.
Yeah, and I think that's part of my other
terms for that
problem too. Is that you could sign something like that, and if you change your mind, then if that were true, then that would be selling yourself into some kind of unless you could say that, oh well, he can consent in the future even though he's not consenting right now. But I feel like consent has to be sustained, like consent isn't just this thing that you can just,
it's a bit difficult, especially if you don't have like the terms written out for what it takes to break the contract.
Like I'm not saying like 100% like get rid of contract theory X, Y, and Z, forever. I'm just saying that like I just feel like there are a lot of weird problems and weird things that you can get into with sort of adopting that framework for things like property and labor, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest issues are just with enforcement itself.
And I think, yeah,
I'd say a big issue is too that human communication and language is not a definite science. The meaning that we have in the head is not the one that we express to other people, is not the one that they interpret. So if you have a ambiguous contract, such as, okay, I give you $5 under these conditions. There's the ambiguity of, what if I want to break the contract too? I give you these $5 unless I feel like breaking the contract. Maybe that's the whole idea of just like, oh, you need a legal system and you need the Leviathan to determine these decisions and everything like that. And like, no, you need well-written contracts, but to a certain point, you're going to just need a autistic amount of specificity to determine, like, okay, if you want to break the contract, here are these rules to do this, and yada 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 yada. But outside of that, what matters is truth. The non-aggressive enforcement of property rights towards truth, in no matter the case, is ethical. Outside of that, just like a false property claim or a false use of force or use of what otherwise would be aggression, or what would otherwise not be aggression, claim based off of just like false property norm, again, that in any case is just wrong. It is aggression. It is unethical, yada yada. Kind of rambling there, a bit too deep in the layers.
So real quick, the wooden chicken says, just saying hi, Jesus Christ.
I don't believe you.
Bro doesn't understand the hypothetical. I don't necessarily know who this is in reference to, but you can't just say that's dumb and move on. Is it like that to me, or?
Where are you saying
think
to
there was,
me or Ignis or?
I think
Yeah,
that
I'm
was
not
to
exactly
Ancat.
certain. Yeah,
Just
I
because
don't know.
you passed, probably.
Oh no, I didn't say. Wait, I didn't say I wanted to pass.
Oh, so
I
smash
think
pass.
I just.
The
Oh,
person
I
who
think I
asked
just
that.
said. Oh, I think I just said in response to the classic question, like, "Oh, can you sell yourself
Oh, I
into
didn't hear that.
slavery?"
We
Yeah,
didn't even do the Austrian
because
thinker
I
fuck
answered
Mary
it.
kill.
Oh yeah. Fuck, Mary, kill. Hayek, Rothbard, Hoppe.
Kill Hayek.
Yeah, kill
Oh yeah,
Hayek.
Hayek wouldn't. Yeah, Hayek wouldn't even be an ANCAP. I mean, he'd be an Auster libertarian for like a brief moment until he turned into a cuck or whatever.
Ignis knows who I'm talking to.
I mean, I
Okay.
think a lot of ANCAPs. I don't know. I feel like
Dumb
Hayek
hypotheticals
That is
do
has
exist.
some
dumb.
good, has some good, Austrian critiques. I
Hayek's
think
like
Mises, Mises was better, but I think
introduction.
he had some. He had some, like, even when he wasn't Austrian, he contributed good things to expand on the methodology.
At least with Hayek, you can
And
kind of trace it to Mises.
yeah,
That's something you can't necessarily say. I wouldn't say that's something you can say with like Sowell or Friedman.
yeah.
So that's the annoying thing. It's just like I think Sowell, however you
Soul.
pronounce it. I think he's a better introduction than Hayek. I don't know about Friedman. Friedman's a pretty good introduction, but has his issues, Chicago school, everything like that. But I'd say with Hayek, you can at least trace it to Mises because that's kind of how it went with me, where it's just like Milton Friedman, Soul, like that sort of area, then Hayek, and I'm just like, okay, I'll read The Road to Serfdom. And then I figured out who fucking Mises and Rothbard were.
I'd say
like,
reject.
Oh,
I'd say reject all three of them. Mises, Sowell, and I mean maybe the race
Mises.
stuff could be some, or fuck, not Mises. Friedman, Hayek, and Sowell. I'd just go read Henry Hazlitt
Henry Hazlitt's decent.
and Per Byland, his intro book.
Of course, per mile.
Let's see. So Wooden Chicken says, of course, but he's claiming that because said hypothetical can't happen, then it's bad.
I can't even remember what we were talking about.
I have no idea.
Isn't the
what he's
slavery
referring
stuff?
to. Is it about like how I'm like, oh, somebody making somebody saying that like, oh, you need to steal this petty, the world's gonna explode, therefore it's bad. No, I'm not saying that hypothetical is necessarily bad. I'm just saying like, I'm glad it won't happen. I'm glad no one's gonna be put in that situation.
What do you think Liquid Zulu would do?
I think he's answered the question where he wouldn't steal a penny.
Bruh. It's so funny because it's like I thought that's what he'd do, but it's just so ridiculous.
It's consistent.
But that's the it's not about being consistent with the actual truth there.
Well, no, like,
as we have this platform, I do want to talk about the discussion that I had. I dislike the way that he talks a bit, but do either of you know about idle work?
No.
Okay.
I'm not familiar.
He's not really a content creator. He was the one that got Zulu into Ancap, so I've heard. He apparently did streams of like debates with Zulu, where Zulu was taking like the anti-Ancap position until he just got BTFO'd so fucking hard that he read into the theory just so he would be correct on this stuff. But I joined Idleworks server. I shouted out his server early on of Apoptosis. I don't know if you remember that. But he is smart feller, kind of a dick, and how he engages. But one of the things that he talked to me about, and I've talked with Ancat about this, is Hoppe's whole argumentation ethics thing, where Hoppe just defines kind of out of the ether that argumentation necessarily a non-aggressive act, because argumentation is the only way that you can have truth claims as well. And the whole argumentation non-aggressively is the only way that you can have truth claims. I would dispute because of my interactions with Idlework, who kind of revealed this to me, where an argument is just information, and you can communicate information through a variety of means, including aggressive means. If I Morse code punched an argument into your face of one ought to aggress, I have aggressively communicated or presented an argument. As such, I'm not bound by assuming non-aggression in the course of argumentation as such, I'm not bound by the non-aggression principle. And in such an event, you can't necessarily like appeal to the non-aggression principle. And I would, without contradiction, be able to claim otherwise. And the whole point of argumentation ethics is if you try to argue against argumentation ethics, you are in self-contradiction. So it kind of puts a hamper on that. But while you are engaging non-aggressively, you are demonstrating a preference towards non-aggression. So you would be inconsistent and thus self-contradictory and thus false if you were to argue against it non-aggressively. But if you were to argue against it aggressively, you wouldn't be in self-contradiction. So it can't necessarily be said that argumentation ethics and thus the NAP and everything is true, but it can be said that for actors who engage in argumentation non-aggressively, they are bound by argumentation ethics and the non-aggression principle and everything else like that.
So with regards to like someone who potentially argues in this instance, is it even in a peaceful term, does it therefore fall? I'm just trying to like figure a good way to, I guess, segue into this. Does it follow that when someone engages in a peaceful action, that sort of bounds them to peaceful actions in the future, for instance? Because honestly, I'm just trying to really understand a lot of the argument, because I think the way Hoppe presents it, especially in his like property and freedom lectures, not only tends to have, I think, some really a lot of big gaping holes and questions, but also just in the way that he presents it, a lot of it just doesn't seem very clear to me about exactly what he's trying to say with the entailments of a lot of his arguments. So, like again, like when if you argue peacefully, yeah, you're demonstrating that, yeah, you have a preference for a peaceful norm, but again, you can demonstrate other non-peace. Like again, I feel like that's just not a. I just feel like I just don't know how that entails. Specifically non-aggression bounding you for the rest of your life, sort of thing.
Specifically,
I'm just a bit confused. I'm just a bit confused by that.
Specifically,
so are you like are you like back on the AE train because of that? Because your conversation?
No, I've still held this position about like consistency when engaging non-aggressively, and because I have the preference to engage non-aggressively, I'm bound by the non-aggression principle. So as just like a matter of non-contradiction or non-self-contradiction. But say of other actors who would rather try to present arguments aggressively, they wouldn't necessarily be, in which case their aggression towards me, I'm allowed to respond to, not necessarily in kind, but with retribution and remediation, and I can deal with them as a force of nature as they are kind of acting. I can't aggress upon them, but I can respond to their aggression. So it's just like it's the same thing that happened to egoists, like egoists who don't care about the non-aggression principle. It's just like, one, it's kind of in your interest to care, because that's when other people will respond with force. But like if someone is just going to behave aggressively, then you can deal with them. It's not like we're just our hands are tied and them aggressing against us.
Well, but if they could argue non-aggressively, wouldn't that just mean that they actually weren't? I mean, maybe not like weren't, but like they wouldn't. There wouldn't be anything to stop them just aggressing on people against the future and saying that's unethical. Their aggression being unethical, like they're still aggressing, but it's not unethical.
So the whole point of this is when you argue non-aggressive. So going back, when you act, you are demonstrating a preference. If I drink from my water bottle, I'm demonstrating a preference that I ought to drink my water bottle right now.
Well,
so when you act aggressively, like say I aggress against someone, I am presenting the ethic or the norm. I ought to aggress like right now, or like in this instance against this person, however much context you want to add to it. General statement being I ought to aggress. This, as presented as an ethic, is at issue, again, going back to it's flawed, and that's the pain in the ass bit. But if one, it's hard to like phrase it in a way that I know is like consistent with the new realization in a way. And I've seen, I know Zulu was there when Idol was speaking about this, and I'm pretty sure he's interacted with him before. So I want to see what Zulu's response to this is. And I'll try to succinctly put it here again in case someone wants to clip it or something like that. But Zulu, if someone were to present an argument for aggression in an aggressive manner, say Morse code punching into someone else's face who is unwilling, then they are presenting an argument. They're doing it aggressively. How are they bound by non-aggression? To say just by out of the aether, a truth claim can only be presented non-aggressively, or an argument that is non-aggressive can only present a truth claim, I think is insufficient, because that's just defining it to be the case, defining it to be true. So I'd like to see that at least a solid grounding or justification for that. Otherwise, I think there's issues with that, but would love to hear the answer.
Yeah, because it would mean that doing that would not only would not be an argument, but therefore by implication wouldn't be a claim of truth. So, and this is the problem, that because I actually demonstrated that what your argument against argumentation ethics to an like argumentation ethics defender, because I wanted to know if there was like a response to that. And like at the very end of the argument, he literally, because of that implication, he literally was arguing that like if someone punches a Morse code onto someone's chest, they're not demonstrating any form of truth.
Yeah.
Like they could literally be typing out a true mathematical statement, but that actually like just wouldn't be true. You wouldn't learn anything. Like you wouldn't learn anything from that.
Information is true or false independent of the context in which it's presented, I would say. So
yeah.
It's just,
so yeah, because there are also problems of like learning about what is truth, because I can learn truth through, like my senses, for instance, like light rays reaching my eyes. That is a form of truth reaching my eyes, but that's not like an argument,
Yeah.
So, also I did want to ask you. You mentioned I was agreeing with you up until you said that arguments that when you do something like drinking a glass of water, that demonstrates you have a preference for it. I was agreeing with you up until you said ought, that you ought to drink the water.
One accepts that one ought to do the action that they're doing, or else they would not do it.
You could argue, for instance, that like that it's unethical, right? That it's unethical for people to for someone to like murder someone, for instance, but you can still do it. You can demonstrate that that's not
but they're accepting that they ought to do it when they're murdering the person.
They're accepting that they're performing an action in spite of something that's true, but I don't know how that's demonstrating.
It's the same thing with the demonstrated preference.
They're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're demonstrating
they're acting purposefully. They're acting purposefully. So they are accepting that they ought to do the thing that they are doing. If you say like, I ought not, it's just the performative contradiction thing. I ought not have my eyes open. I have my eyes open. It's just like I am contradicting the norm that I am presenting. So then I accept the negation of I ought not have my eyes open as I ought to have my eyes open through the negation of the contradiction. We've concluded that I accept that I ought to have my eyes open, at least in this instance, at this point in time.
If you say that, for instance, I ought not to argue, right? Or I ought not to argue, that could have multiple entailments out of it, right? So, for instance, it could mean that if you're saying that I ought not to argue, the implication would be that you ought to argue, But wouldn't another implication be I not ought to argue?
No, not necessarily. Another implication could be, I ought to argue sometimes,
Yeah.
and that's true. That's the true
So
version.
like
At
saying
least
that
sometimes.
right. Yeah, so saying that like I not ought or I not ought to not argue doesn't mean this one particular thing that oh well that means that you have to argue at all times. I think that
Like if you
that kind
had
of has the same problems with, for instance, argumentation.
if you had a range of values with like 2 digits of precision between 0 and 1, let's just say 1 digit of precision between 0 and 1, so you have like 0.1 or whatever the fuck, and you prove that it is not, the number you're looking for is not 0, that doesn't mean
Mhm.
it's 1. It can be
Right.
0.1 to 1,
Right.
however in between. Similar thing with this.
Yeah, and that kind of gets into a lot of the problems with I
That's
think a
just
lot
kind
of
of the
the
deal with negation.
right. A lot of these sort of arguments that sort of fall into that trap, I
I mean,
think.
argumentation ethics, that one specifically has been dealt with, where it's
Right.
just you ought to argue, like when someone argues, one is arguing that they ought to argue at least in that moment, and thus
Hmm.
sometimes.
Right.
You ought not argue all the time.
Hmm.
That's not something that one accepts necessarily. Or
Yeah.
that's not something that can be proven that one accepts from one's actions.
Right.
Basically.
There are also yeah. I mean, I don't know if you guys want to get into
Yeah,
another
I'm
topic
gonna
too,
read some
but yeah.
chats. We're probably gonna do closing thoughts after this. But yeah, good conversation, definitely. Let's see what we got here. No, we already got that one. Oh yeah, why is Mises special as an Austrian, or so
He's
special
the
as an Austrian?
daddy of Austrian economics, and Menger is the granddaddy.
I mean, for one, the economic calculation problem. You know, that's
Human action.
exactly.
Ironically, that's probably like one of his compared to a lot of his other achievements. I'd place that a lot lower. A lot of
He
Ancaps
placed the
tend to
ACP low. Why?
lower than the business cycle, lower than his
Why?
contributions to monetary theory, lower than praxeology, methodological
Bro,
dualism.
it proves socialism is possible.
Huh?
It proves socialism is impossible.
I mean, it proves that a certain form of government, I guess,
Certain form.
yeah,
Anything where you don't
socialism.
have prices, or when you fuck with prices, you are necessarily less efficient.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that like the ECP isn't important. I'm just saying that I'd rank other things higher. I wasn't like trying to say like, oh, he's wrong or he's like because yeah, the ECP is definitely true.
It is the ultimate shutdown in all statist policies.
Actually, really interesting point that like Roderick Long brought up about that particular point. He was talking about like economics and its ethical assumptions, right? And I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, so for instance, a lot of people tend to think that economics doesn't really have any assumptions about economics, or sorry, economics doesn't have any assumptions about, for instance, ethics. But Rothbard actually in Power and Market, and I have read Power and Market, but I guess I haven't really thought about it in this way. He demonstrates that through economic truths, you can demonstrate the impracticability of means and ends. And the example that Roderick Long gave was so economics per se might not be able to say, socialism is unethical, right? But let's say your economic goal, for instance, if we're thinking about like the ECP, your ethical goal, like for a socialist ethic, would be to rationally allocate prices under a socialist planning system, right? Like suppose and suppose that you prove that economically to be impossible. That wouldn't necessarily prove it ethically impossible, but would it really make sense for you to base your ethics off of something that you couldn't do? So, for instance, let's say
What do you
that
mean ethically impossible?
like it wouldn't prove that it would be unethical.
Okay, yeah.
It
I
wouldn't
would
like
say that's
have any.
different from the sort of like meaning of impossible, where it's just like you cannot do it. Say it's just like would it be unethical to summon a billion unicorns to end world hunger. No, that's not gonna happen either.
Yeah, exactly. So, like a good example to kind of parallel this to maybe make a bit more sense would be like suppose your ethical goal was or your ethical philosophy entailed people lifting off the ground, floating and then disappearing, right? Or turning invisible. If you were to prove that impossible, then could you really base an ethics around it? So, and again, like socialism, like the Marxian kind, isn't based around ethics to begin with, which is a whole other thing. But if you wanted to, if you could prove something economically to be impossible, then there would be issues with trying to form an ethical theory around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Also, socialism is based off a Hegelian dialectic, and we could take that could be another show in and of itself.
I think
We'll have to wait on that.
I think what's like more interesting with the ECP isn't really about like owning the socialist XDBB. I think a lot of the more important. Sure, but I think as far as with just the pure theory, I think what's like more interesting is to point out how how the ECP also applies to other models of organization, even in non quote unquote socialist countries like the U.S. For example, like we see these politically connected firms like Walmart, struggle to manage certain organizational problems due to their giant scale and large extent of state and land privilege through eminent domain. These corporations also suffer from a variant of the calculation problem.
I
mean, and I think
I wouldn't say it's a variant. I'd say it's still the calculation problem. It
right.
applies anywhere where prices aren't true, aka when there's not a free market.
Right, and so I think you could reasonably apply that to any country, really, not just the Soviet Union.
I mean, when you have the state ownership of arbitration and state ownership of justice and like state ownership through regulation of literally everything else, then you kind of have socialism there.
Yeah, so I think that. So I guess my critique wouldn't be of the actual argument itself. I mean, my critique was never of the argument itself. It would just be that I think that ANCAPs, not all of them obviously, but a lot of them just tend to point to, oh, well, the Soviet Union's flawed and X, Y, and Z, but they don't really use it to critique anything else, And I think that kind of leaves them the door open to start thinking about other ways to maybe not like plan the economy, but say, oh, well, the U.S. is a free market, and that's just socialism,
Okay, so
and again, like not all of them, but
the wooden chicken said, like, I guess this is a response to the unicorn thing. I mean, it is ethical. That a fine hypothetical. The point. Its point. The point of a hypothetical is to take the tenets of an idea to the extreme and see if it still works. Yeah, I think that's fair. He says idle work has a bigger IQ than you three combined. Nice.
I don't think anyone has a 600 IQ.
Base.
Yeah, I know. I have the.
No, we're compensating for you, Ancat.
I have as much as I hate you.
Oh, we were counting them.
Bro, I'm in the negative digits. That's not even possible.
He was holding us back. Let's see. So, as much as I hate Zulu, at least he's principled. But that's the thing about the penny thing. Like, it's just. How would you say stupid. Like I would not steal this penny because it's wrong to steal? Like that one thing is really what you're going to hold on to and say like, oh yeah, this is exactly why. Well, I think it's really a problem of like saying like, okay, well the nap is exactly what you ought to do at all times. Like I think this is where you run into that problem because then you're saying like, okay, yeah, like even in a situation in which like, okay, I need to save my kid, like in that example I gave where it's like people are in the middle of the road and there's no way to get past them and like you need to take your child to the hospital. Well, pretty much the Zulu answer I assume would be like, well, I got to sit there and wait for them to get up and leave because there's not really much else I can do. Let's see. So is theft okay? Or at least you're okay with violating property rights? Well, okay, I'm not okay with violating property rights, but my point here was like,
penny.
What?
That's stealing the penny. Also, how many more comments do we have to read? Because I gotta head out.
Only one. Okay. You won't catch me napping ever.
Don't nap when there's civil offense. You got to be doing.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Okay, well, property rights are true. It's just like, I don't like to violate them or anything, but I'm saying like in extreme cases such as this, yeah, there might be some case in which I'm not necessarily like, aligning certainly like with what the ethical truth is when it comes to the property rights themselves, because there's just something so important to me that I make an exception for it, obviously.
Truth.
But
just like
no, it's not that I reject that is the truth. It's just that, and I said earlier, like it's, the point is like there is the ethical truth, but I'm making an action that's not necessarily aligned with that just because like, I value my child so highly, or I value the world so highly that I'm willing to take this action in order to save people or save who I care about. So yes, you're okay with violating property rights if you see multiple grounds initiation of conflict. Okay. Property rights are true and I don't like to violate them or anything, but 100% tax rate is okay, guys. That's the same effing logic. What in the insanity F? What's the difference between these arguments? Okay, well, this guy's a little pissed about that.
Again, like there's a difference between performed actions and ethics. Like, if someone,
I'm gonna disagree with you there.
If someone steals a penny, that doesn't stop libertarianism from being true.
Yeah, I don't think it's
you're rejecting truth, though. Anyway, I understand like taking it from like a human perspective. I would like rather pay the fines, or not fines, but the cost of aggression, which is remediation, retribution, yada yada. I gotta head out though.
Yeah.
I understand.
Well, you're gonna say you're gonna violate property rights and then just leave like that?
No.
Okay, yeah,
no.
but we do need to wrap up. So, Ancat, really quick, give them anything you need to say. Make it like a minute, and then I'm gonna say the outro, and we will head out.
That honestly, that's pretty much it. I've had a really good conversation. Thanks for the conversation, Ignis, and we'll have to have more. We'll have to have more conversations in the future because
talk about that Hegelian dialectic.
We will talk about this next time,
True.
Carson. We will talk about why it's justified in stealing. Well, we talked about this already.
We delved into some deep topics today. Holy shit.
Yes. It's been great talking to you guys. I know Ignis has to leave, so I'm going to wrap it up now. Thank you for watching the show, guys. You should bring on a status. Yes. Anyway, make sure to watch the rest of the show, all the other podcasts we have. We have some great conversations. Go watch Ancap vs Agorist 1 because that was actually a really good episode as well. And remember that civil offense is the key to winning. Thank you.